line ho, uyu line lelo mwana wanzeru, line ho,
line ho, uyu line lelo mwana wanzeru, ukacha mama wa amatengazaje kusesa pakomo pamaivaje.
ukacha mama
Early morning
amatengazaje
kusesa pakomo pamaivaje.
magolo wali amuyamikira
akuti line lelo mwana wanzeru.
magolo wali amuyamikira
akuti line lelo mwana wanzeru. Line ho, uyu line lelo mwana wanzeru.
Right, welcome and thanks for joining us again on OY Media today, the 17th of April 2022. For all those that are celebrating Easter out there, happy Easter, happy resurrection, and it's our prayer that the power of resurrection will be very evident in our lives. Right, you're on to OY Media Scotland. My name is Samuel Oludare Yerokun, and I'll be anchoring your program today. Now, for the past few weeks, there have been many things happening on the international and national scene, especially in regards to Nigeria and, of course, Scotland, where this station is based. We also have a branch right there in Nigeria at Ibadan. Today, I'll be joined by Alagba Femi Odedeyi, as usual, and we'll be looking at those events and their impact on the Yoruba liberation cause. Please do stay on with me, and we will kick off after this. Right, you are very much welcome on the program today, Alagba Femi Odedeyi.
Yeah, thank you for welcoming me once again, and thank you for putting on the program after we missed one session because of some programs. As it 2 weeks ago?
Yes, about 2 weeks ago.
And we are happy. I wish everyone a happy Easter day, and that we all thank God for keeping us alive to see the day and to be part of history in the world, because in so many parts of the world, history is being made, and we are part of it, whether we recognize it or not, either passively or actively. So I thank you for inviting me and letting the program go on today. Thank you.
You are most welcome, sir. So we just want to get straight into the business of today. About a few weeks back,
Yes.
even before the Vice President of Nigeria, that is Professor Yemi Osinbajo, before he declared his intention to run for the presidency of Nigeria, your organization did put out a bulletin where you were looking at what could happen if the VP steps into the race, and of course, what that impact will be on the Yoruba liberation movement and causes. And you did make references to what has happened in the past, where we have something that looks quite similar. So we want to kick off from that. Now, your assertion or your views or that of your organization is that if the two of them are to come up and contest against each other, it might not really spell well for the Yoruba liberation cause. So I'll leave you to lead on that, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, I mean that's the bottom line. Uh, if the two of them, now that the two of them are contesting, when we wrote the bulletin, Professor Shibaju was here to make his declaration known. But now that it's known, at least we know that two of them are contesting. And definitely, without, it's not rocket science that the land will be divided, win or lose, whoever wins or whoever loses. They all have their supporters, their foot soldiers, and all the rest of it. So the land will be divided. Now, depending on where the pendulum swings, will determine uh, what happens to the Yoruba in future. But the point is this: the issue is not about they are contesting, and that's the point we are making. We are not saying anybody should not contest any election and all the rest. What we are saying is, one, there is a big problem in Nigeria, and the problem has to do with the national question. Anybody, whether Yoruba or non-Yoruba, that is contesting for presidential election or any election that doesn't address that issue, uh, we, the Yoruba people, now, let me limit it to Yoruba people, are the ones that are going to suffer for it. And we have been suffering for it for since at least, let's say, since 1999, because everything that we hold dear in Yoruba land and among Yoruba people, everything that we hold there are being eroded slowly and now in a mild manner. We don't have any input into the economic philosophy of development. When they talk about just aside uh, comment, when they talk about youth, this, youth, that, youth is not a category of development. When we talk of youth, we are talking of from the primary school age to probably university education. But if the educational system has been so bastardized and corrupted and made ineffectual, the whole concept of youth development has become compromised. It is not when the youth gets into office or when we were in school in those days, in primary school, in those days during the Second World War. I'm just kidding. Um, they used to tell us that we are leaders of tomorrow. Yes, and some of them actually became leaders of tomorrow. You know, they are tomorrow. But the point is, when we look at the kind of social environment that threw us up, that we developed in, it imbibed some kind of character, imbibed some kind of responsibility on the individual, and such that you don't need to get into any public office before your worth is recognized. And if we combine it with the era of SAP, the Structural Adjustment Program, we also discovered that most of those who ran away or left Nigeria as a consequence of SAP were mostly from the West, from the South, mostly from the West, meaning that the level of education that they received up to that point prepared them for the advances and achievements they were able to exhibit when they got to Europe or America and all the rest of them. So when we talk about youth, we are actually talking about the foundational system of the society, primarily education. What is happening, what has happened, and what is happening to education. So if they are not addressing that, nobody is addressing, I mean, they are not addressing the youth problem, as they say, because it is the education that they receive that is germane to the economic development of the society that will make them productive at the end of the day. So, like I said, that's just a distraction. Now, in terms of, I mean, an aside, not a distraction. In terms of what we are saying about both Ashiwaju Tinubu and Professor Osinbajo. What we are saying and what we expect Yoruba people to say is to put them on a scale of the national question, to put the national question in perspective. Yes, both of them will now come, and that was expressed in the bulletin that we sent out. They will say that when Tinubu was governor in Lagos, he pursued federalism. Actually, it was under his regime, of which Osinbajo was the Attorney General, that started this whole thing about creating more local governments, and they fought the local governments, which, I mean, the fact that you have a third tier of in a federation is an aberration. So when they start running around talking about local government autonomy, it's actually a way to destroy the federal system. It has nothing to do with federalism. And that was what Tinubu and Osinbajo fought against Obasanjo, who was also a Yoruba. So they will state all these things. This was what we did when we were in government. We can do it again and all that and all that. They have forgotten, or probably they ignored, both of them now, forgotten or ignored the fact that their mandate at that time was strictly a Lagos affair. They were able to fight their battle because even though the party that they contested under, the AD, ACN, AC, ACN, and all that, was a national or pan-Nigerian party, but their immediate constituency was Lagos. And they were able to mobilize all their supporters, the people in Lagos, for the efforts that they carried out. So now, if you now want to transpose them onto the Nigerian scale, there is no way anyone, whether by hook or by crook, can become president of Nigeria without making holy and unholy alliances with all sorts of characters in Nigeria. You must have alliances in the north, you will have in the east, and you will have in the west. So by doing that, your major core issues will have been compromised, because you are not making only holy alliances, you are making unholy alliances also. That is the political reality of electoral politics. Now, they will now come back and say, okay, Awolowo said that the future of Nigeria is anchored on if the progressives in the south unite with the progressives in the north, then Nigeria can become transformed. Okay, we can say, okay, let's leave that aside without going into analysis of that. Let's now transpose it into the present, that the alliance that brought the APC to power was not and is not an alliance between progressives in the south and progressives in the north. It was essentially an alliance between the progressives in the west, by extension the south, the progressives in the west, and the conservative elements in the north, precisely the northwest, which was represented by Buhari at that time. So it's the opposite of what Awolowo suggested: progressives in the south and progressives in the north. So what we have in our hands now is the alliance of progressives in the west and the conservatives in the north. And the conservatives have the upper hand, as it were, as we have been seeing. So that is limitation number 2. And that is what we mandate an unholy alliance. So regardless of what they did in Lagos State as governor and attorney general, the thing is that if they ignore the national question, and it will be ignored, because everybody will claim that that's what they are saying. When I become president, I will do this, I will do that. They have been saying that since 1999 and nothing happened. So we are now asking Yoruba people to put them on the spot. The when they do their contest in their primaries and all that, they have their ways of resolving their issues. They will form alliances and do all kinds of things. They may win, they may lose, and even when we are talking about it now, they both of them might even lose because they are not the only ones contesting, even on the platform of the APC. You have the East, you have the South South, and you have the Middle Belt that is contesting with them. And then you have the interest of what I would call continuity of power, that the power calculus in Nigeria is skewed against the South. And we all know that. That's why most Southern politicians will do this and do that to get to curry favor from the North. And that's what I meant by holy and unholy alliances. So both of them might even lose out in the primaries. And if they win, it depends on the kind of alliances that brought them to power. And then, like I keep saying, holy and unholy alliances. So we are now saying, rather than put our future on such uncertainties, uncertainty in terms of their losing the primaries and probably losing the election, certainty in terms of if they win the election, there will be so much baggage that will be attached to it that will make us make the victory. Is it what do they call it? Sisyphus? Like Sisyphus, who keep pushing things, and then when it gets to the top, it will roll down again and it will repeat the same thing. So we are now saying to protect and advance the Yoruba people and establish our aspirations, we need our houses of assembly to pass the law on the Yoruba referendum and conduct the referendum. If possible, to pass it before the primaries of the parties to push their thing. And the reason is very simple. If we have a yes vote, like you are seeing on the screen, what we are saying is that we will have a legal and legitimate political movement that will advance what we want. We want Nigeria to be governed by a federal presidential council. Each region will choose its representatives to that council. So if we are going to fight among ourselves, it's going to be among ourselves. No external threat. We have a parliamentary system of government. Everyone knows that the presidential system is so expensive, and that's why they are running around, stealing money, doing all kinds of things. And we have control over our judiciary. They talk about state police. Before I get into that, we have for Yoruba people in Kogi and Kwara State who have been demanding for the past 60 years to be reunited with the Yoruba in the Southwest. So on the judiciary, they talk about state police, and we have mentioned it before. They talk a state police system that cannot prosecute on the basis of its own laws is just a decoration. You must be able to have your own judiciary. You don't have a judiciary that is controlled by the center and then say you have state police, or even when you have state police. And so there must be is it state or regional judiciary that will end at our own Supreme Court. And that is it. That is the only way we can introduce security into our society, that we determine the parameters for justice, both the prosecution, the defense and all the rest. And we have all that. So, and to do all these things, once we conduct the referendum and we have a yes vote, we will have a commission that will negotiate on our behalf. That is a commission that will not be wiped away by the center because we voted for it on our own. It becomes, and the commission will be mandated by that vote to negotiate on our behalf. So even if there's a military coup or somebody becomes president, whoever becomes president, whether it is Tinubu or Shibaju or Yaya Bello, that guy in Kogi State, or Amechi or Saraki or anybody, or even Atiku, if anyone becomes the president, and we already have this in place, they can't wish it away. So they are bound to negotiate with us. If they don't negotiate with us, then they are telling us we don't belong. And that's a political issue we have to address. So that's what we are saying. So that is the importance of the Yoruba referendum as contained in the bill that is already placed before the houses of assembly and the governors. So now everybody, they are holding primaries, they are doing this, they are doing that. We want Yoruba people to put that pressure on them to table it, pass the bill, and conduct the referendum even before 2023 election. So that, in fact, it's a part of the argument will be that if we do it after the elections now, and let's assume that either we lose out, that is Tinubu or Shibaju loses, either the primaries or the election, and they now come in to turn around and say, oh yeah, let's do the referendum. They will now say we are just bad losers. It is because we lost. That's why we are now. So we want it to be on ground now. And it can be done. It has nothing to do with their elections. It has nothing to do with their permutations. In fact, it's what they can do, and we have the means of doing it. So, but the question is, how do we get them? We have started the petition. We are keep writing them. We send out the bulletins. We send it out to opinion makers. So we need to put to put them in that spot, that is Osinbajo and Tinubu, to come out publicly and boldly. Even if we know they may not want to do that because they may be scared of losing their support in other places and all that. But, all these things can be worked out. But that is the essence of what we are saying. And that's why earlier on, when during the welcome thing, I said that we thank God that we are living to be part of history, because it's going to be part of history. If we do it before the elections, anybody that wins and we made that point in the bulletin, anybody that becomes president of Nigeria is bound to negotiate with us. It's as simple as that. If they don't, then, when we get to the bridge, we will cross it, as the saying goes. So thank you.
All right, thank you very much for analyzing that. There have been some, we know there are many groups that
Yes.
are fighting or agitating or leading the agitation for Yoruba liberation. Different groups with
Yes.
their own views and opinions about the path to follow to get to the end result where they want to get to. And with the interest of VP or Shibaju in the Nigeria presidency, we've seen some of the groups have started to veer towards discussing and basing their moving forward on would should be supported between Oshibaju and Tinubu
Tinubu.
and things like that. Would you take this as a sort of a deflection strategy, whether they know it or they do not know it? If they move away from the cause that, okay, we want Yoruba liberation, or even the people that were saying Yoruba nation now, we don't want to have anything to do with Nigeria again, we just want to get out. But with the announcements, we've seen groups now taking sides on, yes, I think it should be this person, and the other person, no, it should be this person because of this and this. Is this something that either you personally or your group has emphasized that at some point, some of these pro Yoruba liberation group will sort of fade away or move to other things?
Well, I mean, it's part of a natural political process for such things to happen. You see, I'm not criticizing any group, and I don't want to criticize any group or individual. I'm just stating my understanding. When you embark on a course, not just a course of action, when you set out on a journey, you need to have a good clarity of the pathway you are going to follow. There's a popular Yoruba saying that "Ọ̀nà kan ò wọ́jà." Too many rules, you can skin a cat in many ways and blah blah blah. My short answer to all that is that you have to know the order you are going, because if you are going to if you are all going to arrive at a certain point and you keep saying there are so many routes that lead to it, you are not going to get to that point, because you don't know you don't know which obstacle or challenges are on any of the roads. So, and that is what is happening. So when you have groups that are saying, yes, we want Yoruba nation, we want this, we want that, we want that, and then boom, the election comes, because they are not prepared for it, then they start saying, okay, maybe if we support him and that, then they will start rationalizing. That is an obstacle. Even those who are claiming that there will be no elections in Yoruba land, and they will go to court, they will do this, they will do that. They went to court to stop election in Ekiti and Osun State. Suddenly, on the day that they are going to have mention it, the court said they are going on Easter vacation. By the time they come back on Easter vacation and table it for report, they will adjourn it naturally. By the time they do anything, the election will have been held. These are obstacles. So if we keep saying many roads lead to the destination, we are not going to get to the destination, and definitely we are going towards different destinations. So at the end of the day, it is only one road that can lead to any desired destination. Why? That road that you are pursuing will have been prepared for any obstacles or challenges. And again, I'm not criticizing anybody or any organization. We are all friends. We know each other, although we disagree on fundamental issues, and stuff like that. And I'm not making an exception of the Yoruba Referendum Committee. But you see, the thing is that, and it is on record, it is written, because we write everything we do in our bulletins. We explain why we are doing what we are doing. So this is not a question of self-glorification. But the point is, we have identified some of the obstacles that will be on the way, and we have prepared for those obstacles. So in our own case, we are not bothered whether Osinbajo or Tinubu runs. That's why I said earlier on, whether they run or they win or they lose, we have something on ground. So for us, it's not a question of should we support Osinbajo because is this, is that, some will all kinds of reasons. Or should we support Bola Tinubu because of this and all kinds of reasons. And then they will start arguing among each other and, all kinds of stuff. Meanwhile, their destination is already compromised because it's already tied to whether Osinbajo or Tinubu wins. So if either one wins, of course, they will be very joyful that we have won, right? And then they will be making fun of the other people. And if the so that by that, and like I said earlier, that alone, because it is not their votes alone that will propel them to victory. They will make holy and unholy alliances, so it will compromise them. Now, there are those who are saying, okay, let us go to the United Nations, this and that. We want a referendum to be conducted by United Nations is not going to come. And I mean, look at one reality in Nigeria now. The American embassy is located in Abuja, right?
Yes.
The US government is building a consulate, which is just a shade lower than the embassy, in Lagos. That consulate is going to be the largest, according to their description, the largest American consulate in the world. So you have the embassy in Abuja, you have the largest consulate in the world in Lagos. The US is a permanent member of the United Nations. And then you want United Nations to come and conduct a referendum for you in Nigeria, unless America wants to do something. And then tied with that, AFRICOM, that is the United States Africa Military Command, has its base headquarters in Germany. And they are trying to figure out how to make, because it is AFRICOM, they have to have command centers in Africa. This is my own observation. No, I'm not a military strategist. No. By implication, if you have the largest embassy, largest consulate in Lagos on the Atlantic Ocean, the Atlantic city, they will have direct control of the Atlantic Ocean through AFRICOM. So, in essence, we are becoming, is sometimes like a military fortress.
Yes, fortress for you.
So these are issues that people probably don't take into consideration, but that doesn't mean we can't relate with it on a practical basis. So that's why, again, if we have I'm not self-glorifying, if once we have that referendum and we have that commission in place, we can negotiate even with America itself. Why? Because America prides itself as a democratic country, right?
Yes.
So if it is a democratic country and we have a democratic and legitimate representation of Yoruba people, we can appeal directly to American people to influence their own policies at home in America. We have the Congressional Black Caucus. We have different kinds of political associations and stuff like that. We can become a factor to reckon with, even in American politics. That is so. When I say when we were doing the thing, we didn't know America was going to do that consulate too. But if you analyze it and look at it, you can see that the whole concept of the Yoruba referendum covers even international relations. And in fact, we said the commission will also negotiate with international communities on the basis. So when people now come and say Onokan Woja, we tell them Onokan Lu Woja, and this is the Ono to Woja. That is the Yoruba referendum. And again, all we need to do is to see look at what are the major obstacles that we can find, that we see, and we may be wrong, but the major obstacle we can see is how to convince the legislators to conduct the referendum. And it is an easy obstacle to overcome, because if we all put our eggs in that basket, they used to say that don't put your eggs in one basket. Yes, you can put your eggs in one basket, because when you put your eggs in one basket, you are compelled to ensure that that basket doesn't crack. You are compelled by the fact that, because you know this is all you have. So you are compelled to protect the basket. So if we all say we need to get our legislators to do this thing, that is our eggs in one basket. And everybody will now put all kinds of pressure that we can to make sure that it passes and to make sure that they conduct it. So, unfortunately, life reality is like that. There will be contentions, there will be contests, and all this and all that. Though it's also good that now that Osinbajo has entered the race, so the question even many people are asking in Yoruba land now is this: it's not a question of should we support Tinubu or Osinbajo. The question people are now asking: what is in it for Yoruba people? Because arguably they are the two most visible Yoruba leaders that we have, the two most powerful Yoruba leaders that we have. So are we going to allow ourselves for both of them to fight it out, or are we going to become the umpire to say, look, you guys, fine, no problem, go and sit down, do this for us, throw your weight behind what we are doing, then you can go and fight your battle anywhere you want to fight it, we will be behind you. So it's a quid pro quo. Give us something, we'll give you something. So I mean, it's yeah.
Right, thank you. Thank you very much for that. Let me quickly move on to the situation in Nigeria. It is something like a common knowledge or a reasonable expectation that towards an election, a government that is in power that may not be performing well will attempt to push up its performance towards an election. The areas that people have identified where they believe that the government is lacking for the purpose of winning the election, the government usually try to boost up those areas so that they can use it for campaign. But what we're seeing in Nigeria at the moment seems to be like the opposite. Things are getting worse almost every day, and we are heading towards an election. Well, some people say there will not be an election, but what we know and what is available, information that is available now, is that a plan is being made towards the next election. So, in the area of insecurity, when even now that the country is going towards an election and all the parties are having their conventions, including the ruling party, but still yet, insecurity seems to be getting worse day by day. Is this, in your view, sir, an issue where the government has become unable to address the insecurity, or is this where the governments have decided to leave things, believing that people will still come around and vote for them? And I want you to situate that with the other party we had before, some few years back, that said we are going to continue to rule for so number
For
of years.
the 1,000 years.
Nobody can take us. So could you please situate these two? The security
Yes.
situation, why are they not dealing with it? And they still believing that
Yes.
the masses will vote for them.
Yes. Number one, the whole question of insecurity or terrorism or banditry or whatever is a political issue. Terrorism, by definition, terrorism or what we now call insecurity, the aim of the practitioners is to try to get the people to have less confidence in the ability of the government to protect them. So they embark on different kinds of stuff to show the weaknesses of the government. Once that thing persists the government is also responsible. I think they used to quote one of the former military government president that if terrorism lasts longer than 24 hours, the government knows about it.
Yes,
It
that's
is true.
General Abacha.
Yeah, it is true. Because the entire motive behind terrorism is not actually to take over power, but to render whoever is in power sort of useless. So now, once if the person in power, those who are in power, want to prevent their being rendered useless, then they will address that terrorism from its root cause. If they don't, it means they are using that terrorism or banditry, as they call it, to sustain themselves in power. Because when people are afraid, when you throw fear into the people, the fear from the terrorists, their fear that the government is not able to sustain them, the government will now use that fear as a reason for its continuity, that yes, we are fighting them, we are fighting them, we are fighting them. So, and when you now, the Nigerian situation, like you have said, that is a constant since 1999, that any government that is in power towards the election, especially the central election, you tend to see a rise in all these activities, in security, terrorism, and all the rest, until after the election. Maybe they will pipe down for 2 years or 3 years and then start again. So all of them use it. And the only reason they use it is simply because they don't actually rely on the election to get power. Power in Nigeria is simply a question of permutations and all that. Governance is not, for them, it is power for its own sake. Okay, I'm a politician. How do I get to power? That's all. It has nothing to do with the purpose or the reason for needing power in the first instance. You build a house and you don't wire it for electricity. You know that it's a limited construction. But you know when you build a house and you put in all the electrical stuff that at 24 hours of the day, once you switch it on, the power comes, you know so many things you can do with it. So power always has a purpose. Power must have a purpose. But when I use electricity, I use electric power because it powers a lot of things in the house. Even your reading, at night, it powers it. So power must have a purpose. But what we have, especially, well, to say since 1999 would be a disservice to Nigeria. I will say since 1970, when, after the war, when the military became the source of political power in Nigeria. That was when everything started going in the opposite direction, that it is power for its own sake. That was why, at that time, you will have a coup. Okay, in 1966, Nzegu said they want to fight corruption. Okay, let's say the war came and disturbed them and all that. So they overthrew Gowon because they said many governors under Gowon were corrupt. They overthrew Shagari because of corruption. They overthrew, what's his name, Buhari, because of corruption. They overthrew Babangida because of corruption. So everything is about we are fighting corruption, but corruption keeps getting worse. So it means they are not telling the truth. So and when people get into power on the basis of a lie, that lie will just become the center of their power. So it is not in 1999 that it started, but let's limit it to 1999 that Obasanjo wanted to fight corruption. This one wants to fight corruption, and we'll see where it is ending. So when you have power, when you access power on the basis of a lie, you have to sustain that lie to retain that power. Otherwise, the basis for your power will be. So if you begin to go to the house analogy, you build a house, you don't put electricity into it in this day and age, but you want to use oil lamp. You go and buy that lamp that we put palm oil and put some wick into it and then light it when it is night. And you say you want to eat frozen or you want to drink ice water that you have put in your fridge. You are not going to drink ice water. You are not even going to have any cold water. Let's even not to mention ice with your lamp. So that is the story of political power in Nigeria, that it is a lie. The whole contest for power is a lie. Therefore, when they get into power, they continue the lie. So in that sense, look at the party, like you said. You said they are going to rule for 1,000 years. That is again, these are brazen lies. The last time somebody said he's going to rule for 1,000 years, that was Hitler. And we know how it happened, how it ended. And then these people came and said they are going to rule for, so you can see that the consciousness, the mentality of the military and political elite in Nigeria is based on a lie of thought, a lie of consciousness, a lie of existence. Everything is a lie, and Nigeria itself is a lie. The way it is constituted is a lie. So when you look at it from that perspective, and it is a real perspective, it's not something I made up. We all know about it. So when they now start saying, yeah, let us go for, yes, we are going to have election, there is insecurity, there is this, there is that, but vote me in. If you look at all the statements they are all making, all those who want to contest, is the same thing, said in different manner. I will turn Nigeria around. I will do this. I have the capacity to do this. I want to build on the legacy. Okay, somebody, Oshibajo said he wants to build on Buhari's legacy. Is this something that one can build on, a bit to overturn? So you can see, I'm not against his contestant. I'm just using it as an example to show that, or the guy in Kwara State, Kogi State, in Yahaya Bello, saying that he made some millionaires, 2,000 millionaires, he wants to make people millionaires and stuff like that. So, or when they use Lagos State as an example, I've done this, I've done that. But what is the end result of it? So what we are saying is that the whole essence, because it is a lie, it keeps compounding itself. So unless you confront it with the truth, and what is the truth? One of the parts of the truth, is the fact that everyone recognizes. When they talk about Nigeria and all that, everybody, at least in Yoruba land, we will say in the Western region, we had this, we had that, we had this, we had that. That was 60 years ago, more than 60 years ago. There was pipe-borne water in many communities in the Western region 60 years ago, that in your house, you can turn on the tap and water will come in from the water corporation source, wherever the source is, 60 years ago. So it's not a lie that we can develop if we have control over our resources. But once you remove that, and then you start talking about all kinds of things, then you just continue to compound the lie. So the truth is, who are the Nigerians? Who are the people living in Nigeria? We are people now. We are Yoruba people. We are Efik. We are anything. We can't deny it. And what the moment you start denying it, you are detribal. What is the meaning of detribalized? You are no longer a Yoruba, and you are so So a lot of things. So when you now place it side by side with insecurity, then you discover that the definition of insecurity by the political and military establishment is also a lie. And they have to sustain it so that they can continue to be in power. Otherwise, if it is not a lie, you say we all know what is happening. We all know how terrible things are, and the reports and everything, both real and imagined. It's all there in the thing. But what is the basic thing that you should do? Why? Because when people are empowered to control their environment, they can take care of their own security. But now you arrest somebody in the West and you take him or her to Abuja, and then you arrest any terrorist, and then you say they have repented, and you put them back into the society. And then if you look at the pattern of insecurity and banditry and all that, most of the people they arrest for Yahoo are from the South, principally from the West. Most of the people that they arrest for banditry or kidnapping or something, principally from the North. So they train them or they make them repentant in the North by the government too, and put them back in the society. The Yahoo boys are not made to repent too. They send them to jail. So you have a dysfunctional attempt at security. And where does that dysfunction come from? From the lie of the definition of security itself. So now that we see how Boko Haram, we also read about it, how it started in the Northeast, how they used them and dumped them and all this and all that. And then they now present it as if the North is ravaged. Yeah, it might as well be ravaged by banditry and kidnapping and all that, and they are doing all that. Why? So that they can also spread or continue the lie that, you see, we are Northerners, we are suffering from these people, and so it doesn't matter where the president comes from. That even though a Northerner is the president, banditry and all that is ravaging the North, even his own state. So it doesn't matter. So we can continue to rule it. But we know that the power relations in Nigeria is more complex than that. But they use that to justify continuity of power. So that's why I said the basic definition in security, because the insecurity and the terrorism are linked in Nigeria. It's not just a question of simple crime that people are kidnapping people and all that. It's a political movement. And the only way to address it is to address it politically. When I say politically, it's not by contesting for election. You can contest for election and all that. But by looking at the fundamental source of that power. What is the structure of Nigeria? And that's why I said something about state police earlier on, that when you have a state police that cannot prosecute, that has no judicial system, you have nothing. So to go back to our fathers, as they say, our recent fathers in politics, the Awolowos and all the rest of them, when they were not faced with all this terrorism and all that, but they were faced with the question of where do we go from here after British colonial rule. So they all came and said, okay, this is how we do it. And they did what they did. We are faced with the same situation. By running away or by ignoring or by pretending that the problem does not exist, you are already living a lie. The problem of Nigeria is the problem of national question. It's as simple as that. Nobody is advocating hatred for anybody. All we are saying is let us express our aspirations within our own circumstances, and we will relate with each other. And by the way, that's what the Yoruba referendum is also saying, that when you want a president, like we have said, if we have 300 nationalities in Nigeria, okay, fine. Let each one send one representative to the federal presidential. If they start fighting among themselves, that's their own problem. It won't affect us. If they vote for a criminal to be the president, when the criminal comes to Yoruba land to make his presentation, we will boo him and sweep him out of the place. We don't want you. Carry your problem like Osibisa son. We don't want you. Oh, we don't want you. Oh. So all things like that. So those are the the context, as I would put it that way. Yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that. Viewers, we've been right on with Alagba Femi Odedeyi from the Yoruba Referendum Committee. We'll be going for a short hard break just now, but he's still with us because at this second segment, we'll actually be looking at some other international events that are going on, especially Britain's deal with Rwanda to have asylum seekers sent into Rwanda for processing. We'll be looking at that immediately after this short break. So please do still stay on with us because we have not finished yet.
Thank you.
Ẹ̀yin àgbààgbà ìlú kí ló dé o tẹ́bí ń ṣòro bí èwe kí ló dé ẹ̀yin ṣe èèyàn bí ọkà èyí ti ṣe àgbà ìlú àṣòro bí èwe. Ta ni ó padà táyé ṣe o ẹ̀yin àgbààgbà ìlú kí ló dé o tẹ́bí ń ṣòro bí èwe kí ló dé ẹ̀yin ṣe èèyàn bí ọkà èyí ti ṣe àgbà ìlú àṣòro bí èwe. Ta ni ó padà táyé ṣe o ẹ̀yin àgbààgbà ìlú kí ló dé o tẹ́bí ń ṣòro bí èwe kí ló dé ẹ̀yin ṣe èèyàn bí ọkà èyí ti ṣe àgbà ìlú àṣòro bí èwe.
Thank you very much for staying on with us. I still remain Samuel Oludare Yoruba and this whole wide media Scotland. I still have Alagba Femi Odedeyi from Yoruba Referendum Committee, and he's been talking to us about unfolding national and international events and their impact on Yoruba liberation cause. I'm bringing back in, and then we'll be talking about the UK's deal with Rwanda on asylum seekers. You are welcome back on the program, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Okay, so we really want to talk about Rwanda and the deal between Rwanda and the United Kingdom regarding asylum seekers. But shortly before then, let's watch this.
You mean? Oh, you want to see?
I'm just going to show this. Yes.
Priti Patel made advances to a couple of other third-party countries to process our asylum seekers for us, including Albania, where a large number of the asylum seekers had come from. And she had no qualms about sending them back there. Well, but Albania said no.
Well, why is that crazy? Why? Well, that sounds that sounds less crazy.
No,
than this.
it's totally crazy. If you're an asylum seeker claiming asylum from Albania, and Priti Patel is trying to put our asylum camp in a country, Albania, that's ridiculous. So you've been trafficked or somehow risked life and limb to get to Britain, only to be sent back there. Albania said no. Ghana said no. Rwanda has said yes. They clearly want the cash. Okay, they have a deep and troubled history, as you pointed out, going very far back. But even to the recent day, political and economic instability. They have a dismal track record on human rights, and we are sending our most vulnerable. And what's, again, I use the word cynical, so cynical about this, and you mentioned it, young men. I came in this morning, a taxi driver from Ghana. He said, wow, if I was an asylum seeker, I would be, I'm a man of color, you know, I'm a male, I'm single. You know, that's to deny in a way that men of color who are asylum seekers, young men, just deny their humanity.
Because it's young.
Okay, so let me put that one stop there so that we can deal with this. Now, from records, about 250 as claims asylum seekers came from Rwanda last year. They said they were processed. Maybe they were in before, but about 250 of them were processed in the UK last year. And according to the lady right on there, I said, UK has spoken to Albania for this same deal. Albania said no, they are not interested because they've also had Albanians
running away.
So it would be like sending them back to where they're running away from. But they've also spoken to Ghana. Ghana also rejected the deal. But then we now have Kagame of Rwanda. Now we know that Kagame is being prompted as someone that is doing something differently when it comes to infrastructural development in Rwanda. Is also being at a bit of loggerheads with some of the international organizations, especially when it comes to issues about justice. He's been accused of human rights, the disappearance of opposition and stuff and things like that. The UK itself, they've criticized him many times. But now we are now in a situation where the UK is saying that asylum seekers that crosses, any of them that crosses the channel, if they are male, they are single, they will be sent to Rwanda, where they will be processed. What are your views on this? So I'll get your views first, then we'll now come around to talk about the cultural composition and context of what could happen in Rwanda. So, getting this news, what do you think?
Yeah, well, it's very unfortunate that Africa is the shall I call it the testing ground for all kinds of inhumanities. Now, you can't say taking care of migrants is an act of inhumanity. No. What we are saying is when you okay, let's look at it this way. In Britain itself, you know how Australia was made part of the English thing, that orphans, criminals, and prisoners were taken from England and transported to Australia to populate Australia.
Yes.
And then in the process, they displaced the Aborigines of Australia. The native inhabitants of Australia were displaced, and that's how Australia came to be what it is today. The orphans, the criminals, and all that. So immediately when the news came about this Rwanda, that was the first red flag that came to me. Okay, so now you are sending people to Rwanda, males, white, of course. I mean, not black, not Africans, and you are paying for it. So the first practical thing is that they will become a sort of segregated community inside Rwanda. And then, the questions of miscegnation will arise. They will have families eventually who will be mulattoes. I'm not against any interracial something. But at the same time, because these people, that is these migrants, are products of deliberate government policy from Britain, there will be certain advantages that will accrue to them by being resettled in Rwanda. So over time, they will become a political force. So that is how creeping, what shall I use the expression, imperialism, creeps in. And like you said, those who are claiming that Rwanda is this and that and that and that, Rwanda had become a pawn in the international political economy. Most of the compounds, elements, and things that we use in cell phones and computers and all that, even though they were mined in what they call Congo Democratic Republic or something now, Congo Kinshasa, are facilitated by Rwanda. So Rwanda is almost a colony of these international companies. Most of the things they call it coltan. It's a combination of all these things. So it's almost a colony. And of course, they project it as, developed this, developed that, developed this, and all that. So when it's so ridiculous, the whole concept is so ridiculous and so, I won't say annoying, but so inhuman. That's why I qualified my humanity earlier. I'm not saying migrants should be treated in any manner, but it's inhuman in the sense that, one, you have asylum seekers from Ukraine, for example. Britons are being paid to house them inside Britain. Now you have people who are not Ukrainians, who are not, mostly not Africans, definitely not Africans. You are now exporting them. They have become a commodity because you are paying for it. There is an organization called International Organization of Migrants. They have made several suggestions as to how to deal with migrations and all that. People are dying. Okay, one of the reasons that the British Prime Minister gave is that they want to prevent people from dying when they are crossing the channel, and this and that and this and that. You want to prevent people from crossing the channel. Okay. Why are people running away from where they are? That is the humane way of addressing this question. People can migrate for any reason. But when it becomes mass migration, there must be a reason behind it. What is the reason behind it? Rwanda itself is a case that is also a source of mass migration. And people have died. People have, so when you look at the totality of the whole thing, it boils down again to the question of, again, if we connect it with the Yoruba struggle now, the whole question of the nation state. What was Rwanda? How did Rwanda come about the way it is? Kagame and the Tutsi or whatever came to power by the mass murder of the Hutus. So they instituted a unitarist, homogeneous entity in Rwanda at the behest of international agencies that are now controlling Rwanda itself. Many of these international, not agencies, rather, international companies, many of these international companies that I mentioned earlier that are engaged in all these things that we are using, that we take for granted, are facilitated by Kagame's regime in Rwanda. So, and if you look at the history of Britain, like I said, aside from the Australian issue, the unitarist, homogeneous origin of Britain, which was what they tried to do in Nigeria, which they succeeded in doing in Rwanda. Rwanda had been admitted to the Commonwealth, for example. I think so. So when you now combine both, that Rwanda is the poster child for a homogenized, unitarized entity. That is why it is easy for Rwanda to accept to play that role and for Ghana to reject it. Because for Rwanda, it's a question of there is it's a question of citizenship. Let me put it that way. That citizenship is the name of the game, and they are in control of the society, and anybody that comes in is okay by them. But countries like Ghana that are still grappling with indigeneity and cultural differences and stuff like that cannot afford to do that. And like we said, when they rejected Albania, that I mean, if you look at it, even from a logical perspective, people are running away from Albania to seek asylum from somewhere else. And you now approach Albania to accept migrants. Does that make sense? So you can see that there's no logic in what Britain is doing. Well, there's a logic. It is not just humanistic logic. It is a predatory logic. Because when you have Rwanda in the center of Africa, and then you still have remnants of apartheid in South Africa, and then we all know what happened in Zimbabwe when before Mugabe came. I mean, when they got their independence, they forced Mugabe to pay the commercial farmers, the European commercial farmers, to pay them compensation, which led to Zimbabwe's economic issues that we are now witnessing. So over a period of time, when you now have these migrants sponsored by Britain, of course, they are not just going to be simply absorbed into the local economy. They will have preferences, because tied to the economic aid will be those economic preferences. And although we call them migrants today, like they call the Australian ancestors prisoners and criminals and all that, but they slowly displace. The situation there may be very different from today, but the trajectory is the same, because at that point there was no Australian state that can contain them. But at this point, there is a Rwandan state that will not contain, but will actually advance. Because, I mean, come to look at it, Rwanda will want to make, quote unquote, a success out of this experiment. So when the first batch comes, the next thing is, yeah, okay, we made a success of it. They will increase it, and they will continue to increase it. And then, don't forget, there is the largest American embassy in the world right in Lagos, so just across the bridge. So we have a big issue on our hands, and I think it also flows from our inability to look beyond the surface. So when they start praising Rwanda, yes, people make references to the genocide, but that's where it ends. But what is the nature of the government that now established itself in Rwanda. And many reports have come out right next door to Congo. That is the Congo Democratic Republic. They call it the Congo Democratic Republic.
DRC, yes.
Yeah, which Rwanda plays a major role in because of their proximity and all that. We are told, and it's in all reports, that the longest civil war in the world is going on in that country, having lost probably 20 million people. So, and where are the arms coming from? These are where they are mining all these things we are using that you and me are talking with, coltan and all the rest. We take our cell phone. Hey, hi, Mr. Yerokun, what's going on? And then, it is the blood of African people right there, aided and abetted and sustained by the Rwanda regime. And that is the regime that Britain now finds compatible with its. So it's saddening. It's saddening, but I mean, we won't let that disturb our clarity.
Yes, I want you to bring that at par now when we're talking about, for instance, the Yoruba Liberation Movement,
Yes.
where we're talking about the people having an identity
Yes.
and being able to live according to their own values and not
Yes.
somebody else. For let's say in Nigeria, you have like 23 or 24 states have to agree to some things before it happens.
Yeah.
So the idea is that, I mean, a majority of people that are not part of us, we're within the same Nigeria, but then they have to be the one that will have to sign something
What we do. Yeah.
and that is part of the system we want to break. That let them decide what they want to do,
Yes.
and let us also decide what we want to do. So we're talking
Yes.
about that identification.
Yes.
Now, if you look at it at par with what is about to happen in Rwanda, we've been made to understand that after the war, the Rwanda war, and all the problems that Paul Kagame, for instance, one of the things that has been said is that they've tried to let the tribes see themselves as one. And to an extent, that's been like a success. But then bringing in other population, for whatever reasons, bringing in other populations that might come with their own values. People know clearly, and this is from experience people have had with the UK immigration system, that majority of the people that are going there will never be processed to come to the UK.
Yeah.
So practically, they are just being settled
made.
there in Rwanda, not minding where they are coming from, their cultural identity, which some of the people that comes into the UK, in the UK, even within the asylum system, you have a sort of acceptance of people's cultural values. Like you have the Syrians, you have they know now that when you go to the house of an Indian, you have to observe some things, like health visitor visiting, GP dealings with them and co. But now with this one, apart from the fact that it's like a discrimination against male, because it's actually male they target, but also these are the males that are actually used as the dogs of war.
Yeah.
They are always the ready hands when some things has to be done, including terrorism. So if we look at the what those people will be taking into Rwanda, you're actually looking at, could this be a sort of a target to because when we even talk about terrorism, we've not really had that much issue about terrorism like we're having it in the Sahel and co. we've not had that sort of the report from Rwanda, or like we have Boko Haram in Nigeria, Niger and stuff and things like that. So two things is looking at what cultural identity is being brought into Rwanda with this deal, and how could that disrupt the cultural balance that is on at the moment.
Yeah.
And then secondly, this manpower, because obviously they are manpower, they are resources,
Yeah.
and they are going to be kept somewhere
Yeah.
in a camp.
Yeah.
This could become handy instruments
Yeah.
for other things that might not be very positive for Rwanda. But if you situate that, the larger picture we're looking at now, and you situate it with what your group is trying to do at home, trying to
Yeah.
not differentiate between people, but creating sort of a political identity where people could live by their own values.
Yes.
So, if, for instance, if this scheme is targeted at Nigeria, let's say it's not Rwanda and it's Nigeria, and Nigeria is accepting it, or the ones that are actually happening in Nigeria, where during the COVID restriction, we've seen some trucks from the north bringing some people down south. We know those things are used for election, one, but also does it actually bring a sort of or disrupt the balance of cultural identity?
Yes. Well, it's multifaceted in this sense. They couldn't. I don't know whether they are pro-Nigeria or not, but they couldn't have. It will not have worked in Nigeria because the process of homogenization in Nigeria is yet to be completed. So if they make that kind of move in Nigeria, it will only complicate things. And this may just be the first in a series of what they are planning for the future. But in Rwanda, the process of homogenization had been completed to a certain level, after the genocide and the superimposition of Kagame. So it makes it easier for them to use Rwanda. But there's one thing that is missing in all of this, and I will link it up to the Yoruba liberation thing, that unfortunately, those of us who are talking about Yoruba nation now and this country broke up, this country, we are playing into the narrative of that homogeneity. And then that makes it impossible for us to intervene even in the politics or the political atmosphere, let's say, of the UK itself. In other words, the whole question of liberation is not a national specific thing. We call it national liberation. We call it national question because it is specific to a national territory. But the quest itself is of international dimension, just like under the colonial rule, that many of the agitators for independence, and we know quite a lot of them in Africa, were not only students in Europe, but the whole question of colonial independence was a major political force in the politics of Europe at that time, before the granting of independence. So, but now, all these nation now and this, and we want to go, we don't want to go, and all that, is making it impossible to situate it within the context of local politics itself. I mentioned it earlier, when I was talking about the bill for a referendum and the Constitutional Commission that will make it possible for us to become active participants in the international politics. So, because of our inability to do that, the tendency will become isolated, and all these things can now start happening. And every attempt to homogenize the country, which is where the 24 states come in, every attempt to homogenize Nigeria will be pursued with the active connivance of those that will benefit from it, that is Britain, for example. So the way I look at it is that our agitation or our quest for transformation in Africa, if it had been, I mean, what they try to do in Rwanda, or what they are doing in Rwanda, like I said, cannot be, maybe they tried it in Nigeria, but it will just compound the problem. But they are able to do it in Rwanda simply because Rwanda had become homogenized. And that is the trend where they are just starting now. Like you said, it's not just, they are not just going to be in an IDP camp. Let us remember that. They are not going to be in an IDP camp in Rwanda. They are going to be made fully functional. Even if they have what they call an IDP camp, it will be a city on itself. And here's a guy, that is Kagame, who prides himself in providing all these things for the people. They will provide them with everything they need. And gradually, the city may expand, and, all the rest of it and all that and all that. That is one. Two, because of the nature of the Kagame regime itself, what happens after Kagame? He's not going to live forever. Is it going to create another crisis? Or is the West going to sustain the Rwanda experiment and make sure, just like they did in Pakistan recently? And now I'm not, when they influenced the removal of the the Pakistani prime minister, because the guy and his government and his party was opposed to the West in Ukraine. And they engineered some kind of parliamentary maneuver and removed the prime minister. So, and they do all these things, under the veneer of democratic culture. So that's why I said, when we pursue our quest, we must also bear in mind that we owe the people of Britain, for example, or America, or any of the Western countries, a responsibility to those people, to let them know where we stand. That is the people of, let's say, Yoruba people, for example, where we stand on these issues. So we are not simply asking the governments of these countries to recognize our rights to self-determination. We are asking the peoples, the citizens of Europe and America, to also recognize it, so that it influences the decisions of their governments and the policies that they bring about. That is the only way to contain, because the danger, I may be wrong, but the danger I see is that it is a first step. And what do they use to get Africa? They give them money. They take African countries and say, okay, we want to do this, and we'll pay for it. And because they are always running for money, because they prefer money over human beings, they will take the money. And before you know it, we may be talking about maybe in 50 years' time, if things remain the way it is. That is when its full realization will come into being. But because we have the ability to, quote unquote, see into the future. When I say see into the future, I'm not talking about, prophecy or seeing, but see into the future, because we have the basis to look at what has happened in the past. We have the ability to see what is happening in the present, and we can put the two together and then project what can come in the future. So, like I said, immediately I saw the thing, the first thing that came to my head was, is this another Australia in the offing?
And,
Yeah, because we know what happened in Australia. And so if it's going to be another Australia, what are the implications? Coming from Britain itself,
yeah.
what will be the implications for our future? So, I mean, that's what I mean by saying, we can see the thing. So when we embark on our quest, struggles and stuff, uh, and then, we tend to rely on the goodwill, in quote, of the governments in power in Europe, where United Nations come and do this as if they are passive onlookers. So what we need to concentrate on is how to get into the political atmosphere of the West so that it becomes part of their political life. And then when these issues come up, uh, we can address it or deal with it as necessary. Because that is, again, the question of oneness and all that, that is part of the humanity that we'll all enjoy. So the part of the humanity is for us to liaise and cut across whether natural or artificial boundaries and project what we want to project. But if we limit it to, we want the government to do this, you don't need to approach the United Nations if the political atmosphere in US or Britain is favorable to what you are doing. The United Nations will just be part of the entire process, aside from the politics of the United Nations system. So that's the question. And why the whole question of unitarism and homogeneity becomes important. Because if, like you said, when they take people down south and all that, if Nigeria becomes a Rwanda, not in terms of killing people, I mean the genocide, but in terms of unitarization, that when the reality comes, and I will link that with the security again, when the political reality gets to the point where it is mandatory that it is only from a particular section of the country that can nominate and install a president. When that reality hits home, that is when homogeneity or unitarism becomes permanent. And when it gets to that point, you will have a Rwanda. Because your own government don't even recognize you as a people. So if you are not recognized as a people, anything goes. So it's I mean, even watching that program, the video that you showed, I mean, it's something that every African should be concerned about. It is something that it is an insult. It is I believe strongly it's an Australian model that they are trying to work out. And if we are not careful, we will just become onlookers. So we have to be mindful of that.
Okay. Thank you very much. I want to quickly point to, I think, about two things you mentioned in the past. Since we've been talking about this, you did mention about the U.S. Consulate
Yes.
that is being built in Nigeria, the largest, as they claim. Also, we're talking about this UK, obviously part of West, dealings with Rwanda. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, you practically also saying that all the groups, all the people that have been talking about Yoruba liberation, they have to look around them and see what is happening, rather than just sloganeering and believing that somebody from somewhere, especially US or UK, will come to rescue you if they will say that when pull come to pushes, or it's a push that come to pull in. That people need not just looking at yes, we want a Yoruba nation, or we want a federal Nigeria with Yoruba on their own, but they also be conscious of things that are happening around them, and definitely picking where they think that they have friends. And that will take us to the part that is going to be the last for today. And this is a report about the WHO chief, obviously seemingly criticizing the West for obviously standing up in Ukraine, or then in other countries, especially. I mean, he particularly mentioned the crisis in Ethiopia, and he said, and other places they've not given that attention. But he made a statement that is very, very important. Said the world is not treating the human race the same way.
Yeah.
And I would like to share that particular one for the benefit of our viewers. I think I've got that right on here. Yes, so we have it on. So we have the WHO chief. I mean, if this one is coming from the WHO chief, then it's coming from a member of their organization. So the world is not treating the human race the same way. And that brings us right to the issue about race. You've mentioned it earlier, but I want you to give us a bit of analysis on it, that where one does not mean that I am not Yoruba, or you are Scottish, or you are Welsh, and things like that. That yes, we have diversity, just like the United Nations always preaches. But then it seems that when they actually come into action, they do otherwise. So I want to help us to analyze that part where people that are agitating for liberation or freedom for their own people are not seen as people that want to divide the human race, but actually people looking at establishing their own people's value within the human race. We have people fighting in the southern Cameroon. There's war is being on. The world seems to be looking away. In Cameroon, right there. We also got a video about southern Kaduna, a video that was made calling on world leaders that they close their eye on southern Kaduna that has been there. I mean, issues have been there around that place for years. Where people are actually targeted based on their religion and they're not talking, but they are willing to give weapons to Ukraine. We're not saying that the nation should not help nations, but if they are preaching and they are talking about human race, then there has to be a sort of treatment that is, even if it's not equal treatment, but right treatment of the race. So we have, I think you mentioned about was it the Tigray in Ethiopia? There are issues going on right there. I've mentioned like Cameroon and some other places. So the analysis of this, yes, we are one human, we are one human race, so to say, but also we have our diversity, which should not just only be respected, but it should be accepted. And it's that diversity that makes our world. So I just want you to harp on that, especially when we have nations where people within a particular nation state, are demanding for recognition and acceptance of their diversity.
Yes. Yeah. That is true. I mean, we are one human race, regardless of where we come from. So the question now is, what is our attitude about humanity? So it's one thing to be abstract about it. It's another thing to be concrete. So that's why I said it's unfortunate that those of us who are advocating for Yoruba liberation or national liberation, we are already putting ourselves within the confines of the nation state narrative, and that suits what is going on in the West. Let's start from Ukraine. If the world, if the world is about humanity, the war in Ukraine should not have happened. It's as simple as that. I mean, it may be a naive political reasoning, but it should not have happened, because what the world should have done was to impose peace on Ukraine and Russia and all the rest of it, or Europe generally. But what we have seen is warmongering. It's like, let us destroy everything for whatever reason and blah, blah. So today is Easter, and I will use a Bible quote. Some in the Bible, I think it's in Psalm 20, where it says, some trust in chariots and some trust in their horses. Yeah. So it appears as if the world, or the ruling elites in the world, trust in their weapons of destruction as the harbinger of peace. In the 60s and 70s, they used to talk about mutually assured destruction because they all have nuclear weapons, and therefore they will reduce that the more weapons you have and all that. But we know it has not happened. They are not using nuclear weapons yet, but they are destroying the whole world. It's just that it is because Ukraine is in Europe. That's why it has become a world headline grabber. What is happening in, like the WHO Director General said, what is happening in Ethiopia and in Tigray is worse than what is happening in Ukraine. So the thing is to now divert our understanding and reasoning. And then we will now say, okay, see what they are doing to themselves. So in Europe, they are harboring Ukrainian refugees, and they are saying this and that. But in Ethiopia, they are not doing that. So that narrative alone has created a dissonance. It has created a division. So, but what we are saying is the nature of national liberation itself is a human quest. And the only way we can make it to reflect that humanity is to make it shall we say, political quest in every country. So let's take the Yoruba nation, for example. The Yoruba, like we have always said, we are already a nation. Many of the so-called tribes in Africa are already nations, in themselves. They have everything to define them as a nation. The only problem that we have is the type of state that will mediate the relationship between the different nations. So when we now start saying we want Yoruba nation, we are saying we are just simply keying into the narrative that is happening, that will project the division of the world, because the world is divided because of the nation states. When they started the nation state stuff in Europe in 1648 and all that, they started it based on the question of that recognition of the cultural and lingual differences that will make them to cohabit. But it has grown to such a manner that it has now become an attempt to suppress one for the advantage of the other. That was what they ran away from in 1648, to run away from that suppression of one by the other from the empire, and then become independent and sovereign so that they can relate with each other. But we have now known since then, especially for us in Africa, that it is not working. That the only way it can work is to suppress one for the advantage of the other. So in this thing, definitely the world cannot treat the human race in the same way. So it just becomes a question of power. Who has the most power? And that's why it is important. And when you say we should connect it and see what is happening now. So it's not just a question of wishful thinking. It's a question of power. So if you tag into the nation state paradigm and say you want a sovereign Yoruba nation state, fine. One, the Yoruba don't have the military wherewithal to establish itself. So you have to rely on somebody. Then you have the US consulate in Lagos. You have the thing in Abuja. You have the colony in Rwanda. And you want to have Yoruba sovereign nation state inside Nigeria. So it's compounding the problem. But what we are saying is there has to be a paradigm shift in our narrative. Not only in terms of the nation state paradigm into a multinational state. That's where the whole thing rests. And that, in fact, okay, let's backtrack a little bit. When the USSR was still in existence at that time, when they started their revolution in Russia, the idea was that all the nationalities under the Russian Empire can be under one union. That was why they called it the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. Anyway, before that, socialist republics in 1921, the Soviets was just a council of, a parliament of people. And then, the internal party stuff, and then they instituted their USSR. So when of course, the nationalities were resisting in Georgia, in all the different nationalities in Russia under the Russian Empire. So the resistance came to a head in Glasnost and Perestroika. What they failed to do, that is the Gorbachev people, is to create a real multinational state for the Soviet nationalities. I think that was where they were headed, but they couldn't reach that point. So everybody just went their different ways. The result is what we are seeing in Ukraine today. So all those who are anti-Russian, we don't like Russians, we don't like this because the Soviet Union was dominated by the Russian Federation at that time. So and that is what has now led to what we are witnessing in Ukraine today. And there's no reason why it won't be like that in Ethiopia itself. When Ethiopia is a very good example of what I've just said. When they overthrew the military, I think in 1991 or 1994, there was a coalition of organizations, the Ethiopian People's Democratic Revolutionary Party. The major force in that coalition was the Tigray People's Liberation Front. The Tigray people was the dominant military and political force. So they created an Ethiopia that is a union of nationalities based on their ethnicities and culture. But because the TPLF, the Tigray People's Liberation Front, acted in a similar manner as the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, because they are dominant, because they have the power, they were able to sort of suppress others, even though they were running a multinational state. So when the resistance came and the government was changed, and then the Oromo guy, this guy Abi, became president or prime minister, and the Tigray People's Liberation Front became the government of their region in Ethiopia. And then there was a conflict between the region and the center based on elections on COVID-19 or stuff like that. One said Tigray said they would conduct the elections. The Ethiopian center said no. And then they went into war. And the war is still happening. And then Eritrea, that had been fighting against them since who knows when, joined up and they boxed Tigray in. So the issue is the sustenance or sustainability of the multinational state. And by that, you look at the history of the wars and you discover that it is an attempt to institute a unitary, homogenized state that is essentially the cause and the basis of wars. Largely, Ethiopia being a good example, Ukraine being a good example. The war in Georgia, that is in the Soviet Union at that time, there's a region in Russia called Georgia at that time. So you discover that when wars happen, even in Sudan, it's the same thing, that you have a central structure in Khartoum that wants to destroy the southern Sudan and then the whole thing. So, and the same thing that is happening in Nigeria now. So when we look at it from that perspective, and we look at what is going on around us, and then we look at how powerful or powerless we are in Africa, we cannot afford to become a pawn in that chessboard. But we have the capacity to introduce a new paradigm into the equation. The reason being that the whole quest we are fighting for, which is national liberation, is also embraceable by even the people in the West. They have done it before. They can do it again if they see where we are coming from. But in the UK, for example, if I come to the UK to advocate for a Yoruba nation state, I might find support in Scotland, but I'm not likely to find support in England. So, because Scotland is fighting for its own independence based on their, of course, that can also be debated and stuff. So what should I do as far as Britain is concerned, but to relate with both the people of Scotland and the people of England? Why? Because yes, Scotland has its own history, which we recognize, and we must recognize it, and that is what they are fighting for. I mean, to recover their history. England has its own history of imperial plunder, which was aided by Scotland, though. So they are not squeaky clean in all these things. So when we now approach the people in Britain, for example, I'm just using it as an example, what message or messages do we want to pass across that will allow us to become a subject of influence in political decision making? So when we are not against any government, but we are not going to say, okay, we are behind Boris Johnson today because he said we made a statement in favor of national liberation. No, because we trust in the humanity of people. Our message will now resonate with their humanity in their different countries. And the dangers that we face, when we recognize the dangers that we face. And this is important. Look at how United States intervened in the Sudan. Some bureaucrats in the State Department, American State Department, they just got together and said, how should they deal with Sudan? And they crafted a policy. And then they do everything. And then they conducted a referendum and said, oh, yeah, Southern Sudan is independent. The following day, they started fighting each other and killing each other in Southern Sudan. How did America become involved in Afghanistan? Some academics just got together and influenced the State Department to say, if we do this. So they manipulated So when things like that happen, those who are going to suffer it are the people on whose behalf they claim to be acting. So in terms of American consulate, just to quickly connect that, I don't know how they came by that decision to build the largest consulate in Lagos. Maybe, I don't know how they came, but we should be wary when we become supposed beneficiaries of some bureaucratic decision making in the West. But we should endeavor to get our messages across to the people. In the colonial era, the Labour Party in Britain was, at least to a large extent, supportive of colonial independence. In the United States, we saw how the Black movement, regardless of all these complexities, the United Negro Improvement Association, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, the Black movement. So we became, when, even Miriam Makeba and all the rest of them, when she was going to be deported from the United States at the height of apartheid, the Black people ensured that they found a way around it, and they succeeded in preventing her deportation. So we need that, shall I call it, internationalism again. And when you pursue internationalism, there's no room for, well, to avoid any confusion. We are fighting for national liberation or nationality liberation, or liberation of nationalities to govern themselves. And we should be able to make that separate from the issue of a nation state. A nation state is not our solution in Africa as it is. Otherwise, we'll just become cannon fodder for all kinds of adventurers in the world. So it's like the man said, they are not treating us. When people are dying in the Mediterranean, they did not create any special place for them in anywhere in Europe to go and resettle them and pay them. And they have spaces in Europe. When people are now fleeing Ukraine, they are now paying British citizens to house them. To house them. And now they are now saying they are now going to get some males and go and house them in Rwanda. So we are just not part of history. So we have to take these things seriously. When they sit down in the inner recesses of their policy making, we don't know what they talk about. So, but from the result of what they talk about, we can make informed decisions as to how to proceed on our quest. I hope.
All right. Yes, definitely. Thank you very much, Alagba Femi Odedeyi. Viewers, I've been right on with Alagba Femi Odedeyi from Yoruba Referendum Committee. They've been pushing for a referendum for the Yoruba people in Nigeria. And like he said, it's for the liberation of nationalities. That even within a state, so to say, there must be that identity, and the nationalities must be able to conduct their businesses and contribute to the national center. Thank you very much. The topic we've been dealing with is unfolding national and international events and their impact on Yoruba liberation cause. Alagba Femi Odedeyi is on the Facebook page of Yoruba Referendum Committee every Thursday from 7 p.m. GMT. You can connect with him right on there. It's Yoruba Referendum Committee. Just type that one in Facebook and then you will get across to that page. But he's always with us every 2 weeks to talk more about the movement, the planning, the agitation. Obviously, it's not everything that will be spilled in the public, but definitely work is going on the ground. And of course, more and more people are being encouraged to join the movement. We'll have him in another 2 weeks. and then I'll just give him about a minute before he signs out. Over to you, sir.
Okay. Thank you for the wrap up. And I thank those who are watching and listening to us. It's very encouraging and that our voices be heard. And we thank God that we are, like I said earlier in the beginning, that we are alive to be part of history. At any point in time, whether we are doing it passively or actively, that we are exercising our humanity by being part of history and making our little contributions here and there. And then when it comes to the realization that there are certain moments, that certain decisive actions have to be taken. And we are in such a moment today, not only for Yoruba liberation, but for human liberation, as it were. Because if the world is able to reduce the prospects of war, then the world will be a better place to live in. How do we reduce the prospects of war? By the recognition of the inherent abilities of everyone as created by God, and not where one would be made subservient to the other. And it has been done before. Martin Luther King said it, Mohandas Gandhi preached it. The non-aligned movement in their days did what they could do. So, and we are now faced with another moment in history where, especially for us Africans, where right before our very eyes, another attempt is being made to formally colonize us. That is what I see the Rwanda case about. And we have a duty, almost a right, to make sure that we don't fall for that shenanigan. And if Britain is so much in love, that is the Boris Johnson government, is so much enamored of the migrants, even their claim that England is small is a spurious claim. There are other places in Europe that they could have done similar things with. They can spread them. They have, if they are 1,000, they can put 100 people in each of the countries and they will solve the problem. So, so there are many things that are happening. And, well, we thank you and we thank Mr. the Yerokun of the OY Media Scotland for giving us this platform, for using the platform, and it will be well with us.
Amen.
Yes.
Thank you very much, sir.
Yes, sir.
ní yóò padà táyé ṣe o. ẹ̀yin àgbààgbà ìlú kí ló dé o. tẹ́bí ń ṣòro bí èwe kí ló dé. ẹ̀yin ṣe èèyàn bí ọkà èyí ti ṣe. àgbà ìlú aṣòro bí èwe. ta ni yóò padà táyé ṣe o. ẹ̀yin àgbààgbà ìlú kí ló dé o. tẹ́bí ń ṣòro bí èwe kí ló dé. ẹ̀yin ṣe èèyàn bí ọkà èyí ti ṣe. àgbà ìlú aṣòro bí èwe. ta ni yóò padà táyé ṣe o. ẹ̀yin àgbààgbà ìlú kí ló dé o. tẹ́bí ń ṣòro bí èwe kí ló dé. ẹ̀yin ṣe èèyàn bí ọkà èyí ti ṣe. àgbà ìlú aṣòro bí èwe.
Right, thank you very much, people, for joining us for this program. And that brings us to the end of the program. Remember, next week we will be speaking with some Nigerians that are standing for the May 5th, 2022 election here in the United Kingdom. Don't miss it. It's at 6 p.m. We'll be speaking to them, their plans, their aspirations, and of course, what they intend to do. And of course, they're becoming a role model for others in the UK. So meet us then at 6 p.m. and that is 6 p.m. UK time. Until then, I remain yours Samuel Oludare Jerokun. I'll see you, by God's grace, next week.
Mwana wa nzeru oh